Well, at least 1,000 caskets, 1,000 bodies. Administrators at the University of Mississippi Medical Center say they've known for a long time there were graves beneath their grounds, but it seems no one expected this many, with the possibility of discovering even more. Jacob Kittilstad digs below what was once a state-run insane asylum this Mystery Monday.
People have always had mental illnesses, and they even knew what they were, but there were not very many treatments available. Of course, there were no drugs. All they knew to do was keep them in an asylum for their own safety, and it was called the Mississippi Lunatic Asylum.
Janice Quinn, who wrote a book on the history of UMC, says the asylum accepted its first patients in 1855. Taking in people with mental disabilities instead of sending them to jail. Now, there's no record of who those patients were. In fact, everyone had forgotten them until now. Ground-penetrating radar identified more than 1,000 graves beneath areas planned for developments. Those projects have since been halted as archaeologists study the find. And there could still be more. The asylum and its surrounding property used to cover 1,500 acres. That's 10 times the amount of space that UMC currently covers. In addition, historians say that a pauper cemetery and a cemetery for an African-American church could contribute to the body count.
If 50 or 60 people die during a year's time, over that many years, you're going to have a fairly large cemetery. I think the fact is we just haven't found it until now.
Jim Woodrick is with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. He says during the Civil War, the asylum held up to 150 patients at a time. After the war, it doubled capacity. But even he can't explain why the burials appear unceremonial. He does, however, say this. Even though no one knows their names, and even though some may have been forgotten before the end of their lives, these people, not lunatics, but people, won't be treated without dignity in their deaths.
It has worth to us as a society to know who these people were and how they came to be there. On the level of human decency, of course they're important. That would be like saying that you or I are not important to anyone, and that's clearly not the case.
There's just so much that we don't know about so much of it has been lost to history.
It may seem morbid, but it's an opportunity to learn about our shared history.
Exploring the unexplained on Mystery Monday, Jacob Kittilstad, News Channel 12.
To move all of the graves discovered so far, it could cost upwards of $3 million. Hospital officials say a number of building locations are being reconsidered now.
Well, real estate is already a tough business, but made even tougher with a tall request.
That's right. The latest out of Pocahontas, Mississippi, sell my teepee. Impossible? Well, perhaps. Jacob Kittilstad has the listing this Mystery Monday.
Within view of these Indian mounds, which rest between lanes of Highway 49, points a 100-plus foot tall teepee. The name makes sense. It's called the Big Teepee, but it's also a big property for realtor Conrad Martin. He says it's been vacant for almost 2 years. The asking price for the building, equipment, and 3-acre plot is
$225,000. And we've had, a few calls on it, but not a whole lot of them. Restaurants are kind of a different stroke for folk, type deal. Peter Barber and his wife, and then there's Trent Lott and his wife.
But the past popularity of the restaurant stands almost larger than that teepee itself.
They'd have their picture made, and then we'd put them up on the wall, and they'd come back up here and they'd look for their picture.
Restaurants have opened and closed here during the past decade.
It would rotate, and those trays would move in a circular motion.
But none had the longevity of the original. Before the teepee, before the building, there was only Big D.
When I first started in selling plates, they were $4 each. Of course, now you have ribs and chicken, and sausage. That's the three basics.
Nobody calls him by his real name. That's John Dalton Westerberg. In fact, Big D and his food were so prolific in Pocahontas that people still come over and ask if he's cooking. But due to health issues, he got out of the business a long time ago.
I'll just let you taste of it and of some of all of it. And if you like it, boy, that's gonna tickle me. And if you don't like it, I'm still gonna be your friend. I'll still be your friend. And I'd let them taste it and I'd turn my back, but I'd cut my eye to see. And if it was two or three of them, they'd look at each other and nod their head yes. Well, I'd wind up selling a lot of stuff just off of that. The main man, the president of Piccadilly Cafeteria one time, and I thought about this a lot. He said, I can take second best food, but best service and beat you every time. So I tried to have my service number one.
And for a time, he was number one, paying for his son's education with the spoils.
I was the dessert man, too, because that's what I did for Piccadilly for 21 years.
But some people in town say without him, the restaurant, it's just not the same. But I might not be asking the right questions. It might not be about how to market this teepee, but to whom? It could just take a special person to restore this location to its former glory.
A lot of people that came up here to just take pictures of these tribal flags. I mean, it takes a person that knows the food business to come in here and specialize in barbecue and get it back going again like it was. I mean, it can do it, but it takes a special person to do it.
But I'd love to see somebody open it and let me show them how to do it and what to do. I cannot do any manual work, but I could show them. That's my dream, to see it going again.
Exploring the unexplained in Hinds County, Jacob Kittilstad, News Channel 12.
And if you're curious, that teepee is made out of material similar to concrete. The realtor says he thinks it could take a direct tornado hit and still be left standing. Well, let's talk. Prohibition-era Mississippi, the 1920s. Some historians say moonshine was already a lucrative trade in the state, but the nationwide crackdown pushed bootleggers to buy and build technology. Al Capone's people had machine guns. Others souped up their vehicles, but it was right here in Mississippi that only one crime ring could boast having a submarine. Jacob Kittilstad heads out to the wreckage on this Mystery Monday.
The ships are bigger now, able to handle what the Mississippi River gives them, but about 100 years ago, the river was a different animal.
Not quite as swift.
And the smaller boats were often crude.
There's whirlpools, there's logs, there's trees. I've seen whole trees coming down the river. It's just something that I can't even imagine that somebody would put this thing in there.
14 feet long, the craft is made of cypress and covered in cheap metal.
It's just old tin, and it's probably sealed with tar around the seams. Well, this was a one-man, they called it a submarine, that they used to haul whiskey and rum across the river during Prohibition. It was powered by a T-model engine. This is something that I wouldn't get in the Mississippi River in for all the tea in China.
Thomas W. Ross,
alias Bud,
is executive director out at the Grand Gulf Military Park. He says the sub's history is shrouded in mystery, but what's known is it was found in the weeds of Davis Island and donated to the commission 3 decades ago.
It just ran low profile in the water. You know, it was just like another log floating in the water.
And for these bootleggers, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Other than the fact that they're strapped into what's essentially a tin coffin dropped into the roaring Mississippi River, all while hauling more than 50 gallons of moonshine, which has this bad habit of either starting on fire or exploding. Then there's that Model T engine, which is blowing out fumes, and if it's not well kept, let's be honest here, it's probably unreliable at best. Bud's best example of the engine at the park is this old Model A. But Model T Ford enthusiast Kirk Hill says apart from the physical danger, it's also a mechanical conundrum.
To put it in a boat, first of all, just cranking it would be a problem. If you get the ignition system wet, it's gonna stop. I would think for something like that, it probably had water issues that would, especially if it was a low-profile boat like the submarine. I would fear for my life most of the time.
During Prohibition, people would go to any lengths to get liquor. It didn't matter whether it was bathtub gin, moonshine, rum, anything that was alcohol. They would pay what it took to get it. Bravery, stupidity, or he had a siphon line of moonshine and was having a nip as he went across.
And that may have been the strategy well into the 1950s, Bud says. After all, Prohibition may have ended in 1933, but moonshine is still illegal to this day.
You know, you could carry quite a bit of liquor in one trip, and nothing says that they don't turn right around and make another trip.
Exploring the unexplained on Mystery Monday, Jacob Kittilstad, News Channel 12.
Something else I never knew. Thank you very much, Jacob. Model T collectors in the area say they've heard stories about the sub's engine still surviving somewhere. It went missing after the death of an underground collector almost a decade ago.